Are you planning your first Alaskan cruise? Well, we've got you covered. There's so many things that we wish we would have known before embarking on our own adventure, from choosing the perfect itinerary to packing for unpredictable weather. So in this video, I'm gonna share with you all the things I wish I would have known in advance of our first Alaskan cruise so you can make the absolute most of your adventure. Trust me, you're not gonna wanna miss this. So if you're ready, we are. Let's go. Hey y'all, I'm Evan with Family at Sea, your go-to channel for all things cruising. Here we share our adventures, tips, and reviews to help you make the most of your cruise vacations. In today's video, I'm diving into the things we wish we would have known before our first Alaskan cruise. Things like choosing the perfect itinerary or planning the perfect excursions. All the things you need to know to make the absolute most of your first Alaskan cruise. If you love cruising, or if you're planning your first cruise, be sure to like this video and subscribe down below to stay up with all of our travel tips and updates along the way. So with that out of the way, let's get started. The first part of planning the perfect Alaskan cruise is choosing the right itinerary. There's a lot of different itinerary choices when you're sailing through Alaska, and no one itinerary is going to be perfect for everybody. What's right for you may not be right for us and vice versa, but there's some things that are helpful to understand so that you can choose the right itinerary for your wants and needs. For us, we knew two things that were important. The first was we knew we wanted to see Glacier Bay, which is this incredible national park that you sail through, but there's only 3 cruise lines that have a permit. Those are Holland America, Princess, and Norwegian. For us, we knew the second thing that was important to us was we were going to be sailing with our kids. They're young, so we wanted a family-friendly cruise. So for us, that ruled out Holland America and Princess, perhaps naively, but for us at the time, it ruled those out, and so it left only Norwegian. So we ended up sailing on the Norwegian Encore on a 7-day round-trip cruise itinerary out of Seattle. Your round-trip cruises primarily start out of either Seattle or Vancouver. There's not a huge variance between the two, so it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference unless you want to see Seattle or Vancouver before or after your cruise. But as far as where they go, it doesn't change much because those two places are so close to each other. The second thing that you really need to consider there is the inside or the outside passage. A lot of the cruises go through the outside passage, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just means on your way out and your way back, those first sea days, you're only gonna have the mountain vista views or the incredible scenery off of one side of the ship. I don't think this is a big deal because most people are going to be enjoying the ship on those sea days, so you're not gonna spend a whole lot of time looking out the windows or sitting out on your balcony on those days anyways, but it's just something to be aware of, that if you do choose an itinerary that has that inside passage, you're gonna have great views off both sides of the ship versus only one and the other side just looking out into the ocean. The second thing to consider is what are the ports you're gonna be stopping at, and also how long will you be at each of them. So one of the sacrifices we made with Norwegian by wanting to go through Glacier Bay was that we didn't get a whole lot of time at a couple of the ports. Juneau, we had 7 or 8 hours. Skagway, we had even more. So those two were fine, but in Ketchikan, we had less than 4 hours. They said we had 4, but the all aboard time actually made it 3.5. And then you lose an hour, even an hour and a half between waiting in line for shuttles and trip time and whatnot. So by the time you factor all that in, you're only getting 2.5 hours in Ketchikan, which is really a shame because Ketchikan is a beautiful coastal town there in Alaska, and I really wish we had had more time there. And then on the final day, we were in Victoria, Canada, which is a beautiful island, and a drawback there, the same thing. They said 4 hours, really you get 3.5. You gotta have trip time to get into town, and even worse, you didn't get there and get off the ship until 8 p.m. And so you're there from 8 to call it midnight. And how many things are even open that late at night, right? So you're not gonna get to do a whole lot of things in Victoria. The savvy cruiser is gonna tell you, yeah, they have to stop there because of US maritime laws. It requires US bound cruises that start and finish in the United States to have at least one international port. Otherwise, the entire crew has to be American. And with the exception of the Pride of America out of Hawaii, none of the others can claim that. So they have to stop in at least one international port. So really stopping in Victoria is just checking that off the list. But if you're gonna be there, wouldn't it be nice to be able to actually get to enjoy the time while you're there? So anyways, just things to consider. Are you okay with making those sacrifices? Are you not? What's important to you? The other thing to consider there is, are you okay with a one-way itinerary? Meaning maybe you start in Victoria or Seattle and you finish in Anchorage or Sitka or somewhere further north. If you do that, it's going to complicate travel plans maybe a little bit, but not significantly. But you're going to be able to see some more of Alaska that you don't get to see on those round trip itineraries. So really, you need to think about what is the right itinerary itinerary for you? Are you okay with having a couple of short port calls, knowing that you get to see Glacier Bay? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. What's right for you is right for you, right? I'm not here to tell you here's exactly what you should do, but I do want to make sure you're informed. So that's the first thing that you really want to consider is what is the right itinerary for what you want to see and what you want to do while you're in Alaska. Once you've identified the things that are important to you for your Alaskan cruise itinerary, the next step is to review what cruise lines and cruise ships offer those itineraries. As I mentioned, if you want to do Glacier Bay, your options are Holland America, Princess, and Norwegian. But if you're okay with going through some of the other glaciers or other areas of the Alaskan coast, you've got other options like Disney and Royal Caribbean and a whole bunch of others. So there's a lot to choose from, and it's really about finding what's important to you. Is it important that you have an indoor pool? Is it important that you have slides, even though it's going to be a little bit cold for those? Are you looking for a family-friendly line, or do you want to be on a cruise ship with as few kids as possible? Whatever it is you're looking for, you're going to find a cruise ship and a cruise line that offers those things to you, but you should really put some thought into what are the things that I want on the cruise ship itself, and then really think about what's more important to me. If I have to make a sacrifice between the right itinerary or the right ship, which one's more important? So again, there's a lot of different choices here. I encourage you to think about what are the things you want to experience on the ship itself, whether it's large casinos or tons of family activities or phenomenal food, whatever it is, really think through those things and do some research on those cruise lines and those cruise ships so that you can find not only the right itinerary, but also the right ship with the right experience. Something you may not realize about the southern coast of Alaska is that it is actually a rainforest. And as the name implies, it rains a lot. The good news is, at least while we were there, although there was a good amount of rain, it was more of a steady drizzle or mist than a hard downfall. But you do need to be prepared to not only stay warm, but also to stay dry. So I highly recommend investing in some waterproof shoes and waterproof clothes, and not just one layer, but multiple layers. We wore long johns that were waterproof, and then a second layer like a merino wool sweater, and then a raincoat and rain pants on top of that second layer. This worked for us. We were there in July, so it wasn't quite as cold as if you're there in a shoulder season like April or September, but this is really nice for us. We were able to take layers off as we needed to if we got too hot, and we just brought a backpack with us that was mostly empty, so we had somewhere to store those when we didn't want to be wearing them. So I highly recommend investing in not only warm clothes, but also waterproof clothes. Something else you're probably going to need to consider is also bringing clothes for warm weather, especially if you're going to spend any time in Vancouver or Seattle before and after like we did. But it was 95 degrees in Seattle before our cruise. If we'd been walking around in our warm clothes for Alaska in 95-degree heat, we would have been miserable. It was hot already, but fortunately we had some shorts and whatnot that we were able to wear while we were in Seattle, but it was definitely on the hot side. So you're also going to need to bring some clothes that'll help in warm weather as well. And then the other thing, there's 100 different packing tips you can uncover, and there's videos specifically for this. So I don't want to spend 20 minutes going over all of them. However, one other thing that you should definitely consider is some sort of nature-friendly mosquito repellent. The mosquitoes in Alaska are huge, like unlike any mosquitoes I've ever seen, and they're everywhere, like literally everywhere. I'm usually the sort of person that mosquitoes typically don't bother me very much. I know they seem to like some people and not others, but in Alaska, they're non-discriminatory. They like everybody. So just be prepared for that there's a lot of mosquitoes, but if you can bring something that's going to be friendly to the nature and protect, that environment around you, but also keep the mosquitoes off, it's worth it. That's also one of the nice things about wearing like scarves or multiple layers is there's at least less skin exposed for the mosquitoes, but you're definitely going to be prepared for those. So warm clothes that are also waterproof, also some clothes for warm weather, and then having something with you to try and keep the mosquitoes away as much as you can. Another consideration with it being a rainforest is that whatever you have planned for your excursions may not go exactly as you have planned, so you need to make sure you have a backup plan for your plans. I knew this going into things, and my optimistic nature kind of bit me here. When we got to Juneau for that first port call, we had what was going to be a trip of a lifetime. We were going to board a helicopter and ride to a glacier, where we'd get off and do a dog sledding trip and then board the helicopter and come back. And that would have honestly been one of the greatest memories I ever had, and I wanted so bad for my kids to have that experience. But we got to Juneau, it was rainy, it was foggy, they canceled the trip, and I really didn't have a backup plan. That was a mistake. So we made the most of it. We ended up going to Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center and hiking up the Nugget Falls, and it was okay, but it wasn't what it would have been had I had a proper backup plan in place. So I thought as a backup plan, we'd just get off the ship and there'd be something we could book there at the port, and that wasn't true. There was very little that we could book the day of, and that was a misstep. And then the next day we were going to Skagway. And so in Skagway, I had a backup plan. If we didn't get to do dog sledding the day before, we had rented a car. We were driving up the South Klondike Highway, and there was all these incredible stops that we're going to be going to along the way. And I get a text message that morning just as we're arriving in Skagway. It says, hey, we're the rental car company. I hate to tell you this, but there was a mudslide yesterday and the road is closed.
And this is as far as we can go. It is road closed right here, y'all.
Did not plan for that. So now our backup dog sledding trip out. Pretty much everything we had planned that day was out. We still ended up renting the car because I didn't have a backup plan. Hadn't even thought of a backup plan there. There was even a lot of those train excursions that are so famous there in Skagway. A lot of those didn't happen because the routes were closed due to mudslides. We ended up driving still. We got as far as the Yukon Suspension Bridge. That was a cool experience, but that was really supposed to be the first experience of many, and it ended up being our main experience that day. We saw some pretty stuff along the way, but that was the whole day. We had a whole day in Skagway and we pretty much lost the day. So that was really disappointing. So we were 0 for 2. The next day we went through Glacier Bay. The day started so foggy and you couldn't see anything. I was really worried about that. Fortunately for us, it ended up being okay and the fog went away and we had an incredible time looking and seeing all the wildlife and the glaciers there in Glacier Bay. But then the next day we were in Ketchikan and we're supposed to take a float plane and go to the Misty Fjords, and because of the weather, that was canceled. We ended up still doing a float plane tour, but it was to an area that wasn't quite as nice. So guys, have a backup plan. I, at some level, knew this, but again, I'm optimistic by my very nature, and my optimism bit me on this. Not only did we not get to do one of those excursions, really everything we had planned the entire week didn't go according to plan. We still made the most of it. We still had a good experience, but I wish I would have spent some more time coming up with, if this doesn't happen, what's something that's going to happen regardless of the weather, so we have a plan in place. So my advice to you is make sure you've got a backup plan for your excursions. It's a rainforest. Things are not going to go as planned, and you want to make sure, especially if this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, that you've got a backup plan for something to do when things don't go the way you thought they would. Something you'll hear me talk about a lot, whether it's related to cruising or just life in general, business, my kids in school and sports, my wife, whatever it is mindset and how important the mindset is. And so I will encourage you, whether you're going to Alaska, the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, or anywhere else, make sure you go into things with the right mindset. A cruise is going to be incredible, right? You're going to have an incredible time in Alaska. It's going to be a trip of a lifetime, but only if you've got the right mindset, because just like I talked about with the excursions, things are not going to go according to plan 100% of the time. And one of the most important things to understand there with an Alaskan itinerary in particular is it's going to be crowded. So prepare your mind for that. Prepare your mind to understand that, look, I'm going to be on this awesome cruise ship and it's going to have all these incredible things, but this cruise ship was probably built for a Caribbean itinerary or the Mediterranean or a warm weather environment. So people probably aren't going to be out at the swimming pools very often. They're probably not going to be going down slides if they have slides. If there's a nice outdoor promenade deck with outdoor seating, they're probably not going to be spending a bunch of time there. And what that means is the interior spaces are going to be a lot more crowded as a result, because instead of having all these different areas where people can be distributed throughout the ship, they're going to be concentrated in a handful of areas, and it's just going to be a lot more crowded than it usually is. Our cruise on the Norwegian Encore was honestly the most crowded cruise ship we've ever been on, and we've done a lot of cruises. But I think a part of that was because of what I said. I think it was just people were more concentrated in the interior spaces, and as a result, it just felt really crowded. And that could be really a deal breaker for some of you if you don't go into it. If you're expecting this incredible luxury experience, and there's definitely moments of luxury, right? Not having to cook or clean or do all those things, that's really, really nice. But if you're expecting Ritz-Carlton experience and it's crowded and sometimes you have to fight to grab a drink or wait in line to grab dinner or whatever it is, cruises, that can really put a downer or a damper on your cruise experience. So I highly encourage you, go into things with the right mindset. Understand the cruise ship is probably going to be more crowded than it would be on a Caribbean itinerary, even on the same ship, because a lot of those outdoor spaces aren't going to be fully utilized. And if you know that going into it, you can get yourself prepared for it and still have an incredible experience. But if you've got the wrong expectations going into things, it may really put a damper on things, and I don't want that for you. I certainly don't want it for me and my family. So it's just something that I prepare myself before every single cruise is things aren't going to be perfect. Excursions are going to get canceled. We might lose a port, whatever it is, but I'm still going to make the most of every moment and do my best to keep a positive outlook throughout the entire experience. So I encourage you to do the same. Get your mind right and you're going to have a great time. Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I know that's a little bit ridiculous, but guys, one of the really important things that you need to make sure that you do to prepare for your Alaskan cruise is invest in at least one pair of really good binoculars. We brought 2 pair with us. There were 4 of us. That was enough. We got a less expensive pair that had a 25x zoom, a nicer pair that had a 50x zoom. Honestly, I kind of wish I had spent a little bit more and gotten something with a 100x zoom, but make sure you invest in binoculars because there's so much incredible wildlife that you're going to want a better view of. And if you don't, you're going to see them, about the size of an ant, hundreds of yards off. So definitely bring some good binoculars. If you don't, they'll sell them to you on the ship. They have them in the store as well as in the observation lounge as we sailed through Glacier Bay, but the prices will definitely make you wish you had brought them with you instead of buying them on the ship. So highly recommend getting some good binoculars. I'm going to put a link in the description to the ones that we got. Hopefully that's helpful, but even if not, do the research, find your own, see what's going to work for you. But guys, you will absolutely wish you brought binoculars if you don't. So spend the money to buy some in advance. You're going to see some incredible, breathtaking things as you sail through and explore Alaska, and you're going to want to remember some of those moments. So having a great camera is a must. Now the good news is a lot of the newer phones have fantastic cameras, so that may be good enough, but if you're going to use your phone, just make sure you've got it ready so you can snap a picture as quickly as possible. And I say that because say you're trying to get a whale breaching as it comes up through the ocean, or a bald eagle as it soars by, you're not going to have a lot of time to get your phone out and get ready. You need to be ready to take a picture right now. So if you have an Android phone like I have, I just hit my power button twice and it goes into photo mode automatically. I'm sure iPhones have a similar feature, but whatever it is, make sure you know how to get your camera open as quickly as possible. So when you're experiencing those once in a lifetime, or at least not very many times in a lifetime moments, that you're ready to capture footage. In fact, one of the times we were walking through downtown Juneau, and I looked up a stairwell and it was a really tall stairwell. And I looked at my wife and said, "Hey, Mackenzie, look at that." And she says, "Wait." I said, "What?" I said, "Look at the bear." I don't blame the bear. He didn't want to go up those stairs. I don't want to go up those stairs either. So there's a bear on those stairs. Sure enough, I went back. There was a bear on those stairs. Now, I had a bit more time to pull my camera out there, but there's going to be moments that you need to be ready to take a picture that are completely unexpected. So the good news there is somebody scared the bear off and it ran up some of the stairs. I can't say I blame the bear. If I was in the middle of those stairs and I looked up and there was, 100 plus more steps and I looked down and there were some people that probably wouldn't be too happy with my presence, I would probably stop there and chill for a minute before I climb my way up as well. But the good news is the bear went up, it ran away, everything was fine. But guys, have your camera at the ready so when you experience those moments, you can capture them. Going back a little bit to what we discussed earlier with the mindset is have an understanding of what you should expect to see. If what you expect to see in Alaska is snow everywhere as far as the eye can see, you may be a little disappointed, at least if you go in the summer months like we did. We went in July, and while things were beautiful and we saw so many amazing things, we really didn't see a whole lot of snow because in July it's in the 50s and the 60s and it had pretty much all melted with the exception of like the top of some mountains in the distance and on the glaciers themselves. So if what you're picturing is snow everywhere, you're either going to want to go earlier or later in the season, or just have an understanding that what you kind of picture Alaska to be may not be exactly what you actually see when you get there, because while there's lots of snow in the middle of summer, even in Alaska, a lot of parts on the southern coast at least are not going to be super cold, and therefore there's not going to be much snow. Something else you want to plan for, as well as just be mentally prepared for, is the cost of everything. You know, when you go to the Caribbean, a lot of things are pretty inexpensive because they have the entire year to make their money. But in Alaska, their tourist season, at least for cruising, is really 4 to 6 months out of the entire year. So they have to make all the money they need for operating their business throughout the entire year in those 4 to 6 months. And as a result, everything's expensive. In addition to that, the logistics are challenging, right? They made the same joke in a couple of the different ports we're in, which is there's 3 ways to get here: by ship, by plane, and to be born here. And if you're a food item or something like that, there's really only 2 ways, because there's no roads that lead in or out because of the remote nature of where you're going. So everything's expensive. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth going to Alaska, but you just need to be prepared for whatever you think something should cost. You can pretty much double it, and maybe it costs that, but it might be more than that. So that was a little bit of a sticker shock when we were doing our initial planning. Fortunately, we knew that going into things, so we were ready for it, but it's something you definitely want to be prepared for. One of the unfortunate realities when planning any vacation is that you've probably got some sort of budget you're working within. And as we already discussed, Alaska is expensive. So you're gonna have to make some sacrifices and decide what are the areas that are most important and where you may be willing to make some cutbacks so that you have more money to spend on those important areas. One area I would strongly recommend considering spending the money is on a balcony stateroom. You're gonna see some incredible things in Alaska. Wildlife like you've probably never seen before. Humpback whales, orca whales, bald eagles, bears, amazing things. You're gonna see some incredible mountain vistas, the snow-capped mountains. Some of the things you're gonna see, you may not ever see again, and it's absolutely breathtaking, and you want your undivided attention to be on that and nothing else. You just wanna forget about the world around you and be focused on what's in front of you. And it's really hard to do that at times from the observation lounge or the pool deck or the promenade, because there's so many people there, especially on these Alaskan cruises, because as we already discussed, they're crowded. But if you've got your own balcony off of your stateroom, that space is yours and yours alone. It is your space to just look at the world pass you by and not have another worry out there. So I highly recommend considering investing in the experience of having a balcony stateroom. I will admit that they can be priced at a premium depending on when you're sailing and on what ship. The price bump can be a decent amount. When we were sailing on the Norwegian Encore, the price difference from an interior stateroom to a balcony was about $1,500. That's a much bigger jump than what you would see in the Caribbean for the same room. But the reality is, it's worth it, at least in my opinion. So consider spending the money on a balcony stateroom, and if you do, you're not gonna regret it. Even with the balcony stateroom, there will still be times where it's nice to see some different perspectives from the ship, and the observation lounge is a great place to get those. Now, I'll be honest, if you're sailing through an area like Glacier Bay like we did, it's going to be exceptionally crowded. In fact, we got down there at 5 a.m. Well, I got down there at 5 a.m. to grab a spot, and I got the last open seat in front of a window. So if I had gotten there even a minute later, we would have been sitting behind other people in a less than ideal spot. So if I was gonna do it again, I wouldn't cut it that close. I thought I was getting there early enough, but apparently probably not. So in fact, I talked to some people that had the best views, which were at the front corners, because they not only got a great 180 degree view, but they kind of had 270 degrees. And I asked them, and they said they were down there before midnight, and the ship kicked them out at midnight because they wanted to set things up for Glacier Bay Day. And then they went back at 1 a.m. and they were in there from 1 a.m. They slept in the observation lounge. I was not that committed, but instead of going down at 5 a.m., perhaps I would have gone down at 4:30 a.m. and hopefully that would have been early enough. The reality is, it's a toss-up, right? Like, you might go down there at 4:30 a.m. one time and there's tons of seats open. Another cruise, there might be none open. So you've got to decide how early you're willing to make it down there, but you are going to get not just some incredible views, but you're going to get some other things that are part of that experience. You've got food and drinks right there. There's other people that you can converse with as you watch the world pass you by. And like I said, they've got the park rangers down there that are sharing over the loudspeakers all the different things that you're seeing. So it's absolutely worth it. And on a similar note, I went down at one point to the bow of the ship, which is the front of the ship. They open it up. This space is typically not available, but for Glacier Bay, they did open it up. And it was one of those moments that you'll remember for the rest of your life. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, you remember that feeling the first time you see the Grand Canyon. You've seen it in pictures, you know what it looks like, but there's just something about it that when you're there in its presence that is otherworldly. And when you're out there on the bow of the ship, looking at these amazing glaciers and everything else that's surrounding you, it's a very similar feeling. So if your ship happens to open the bow of the ship or some other special areas of the ship where you can get an even better view, I highly recommend, you don't have to go down there the whole day, but go down there for 10, 15, 20 minutes just to experience it a bit more up close and personal. It is absolutely worth it. On a similar note, there's likely a whole bunch of places you can get some pretty incredible views from across the ship. If the observation lounge had been full, I had 2 other backup spots I was going to go to. On the Norwegian Encore, there was a bar called the District Brew House. They had some really amazing seating that I was going to go to as a second option. If that was full, we'd have spent some time up on the pool deck, at least in the covered areas where it wouldn't have been as cold. I had other things scouted in advance. Fortunately, I did get that last seat in the observation lounge, but really be thinking about that in advance. If there's a day where you're sailing through an area like Glacier Bay that you want to make sure you've got incredible views, especially if you don't have a balcony stateroom, scout them out in advance. So when you do go out of your room and you want to take those views in, you know exactly where you're going. Hey, first I'm going to the observation lounge, then I'm going to the District Brew House, and then I'm going to the thermal spa. Whatever those spaces are, scout them out, know in advance so you can make the most of those moments. If you've made it to this point in the video, congrats, because you're well on your way to planning an amazing Alaskan cruise adventure. And I've got one more tip that's really gonna help a lot of you. But before I share it, a quick request. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable, would you please take a moment to like and subscribe to my channel, as well as maybe even leave a comment that tells me which part of this video was the most helpful to you. Here's the reality. I love cruising. I'm very passionate about it, as you can hopefully tell. I wanna help as many of you love cruising as much as I do. And the only way I'm going to do that is by putting in the work, creating great content, and by you guys engaging with me, which shows YouTube that I'm doing something that's worth being shared. So if this has helped you at all, it'd mean the world to me if you take a moment to do that. So with that said, we already discussed that cruising Alaska is expensive. There's no way around it. It's just an expensive process. But the good news is I created another video called 15 money-saving hacks the cruise lines don't want you to know about. And it's really helped a lot of people save a lot of money on their cruises, not just with the initial booking, but also saving money on excursions and onboard credits. So click that video right there and it's gonna help you even more than this one has. And the second piece of this is, guys, when you're on this cruise, if you realize, I really enjoy this, I wanna do this again. All the different cruise lines have something called the future cruise desk or the next cruise, or they all call it something different. But what it is it's a desk where you can make a reservation and place a deposit on your next cruise. You don't even have to put it down on a specific cruise. You're just making a commitment that says, hey, I enjoyed this, I would like to do this again. And in exchange for you doing that, the cruise lines are going to give you a varying amount of free onboard credit for you making that commitment. Depending on which room you get or how expensive the cruise is, exactly how much you're going to get is going to vary. But if you're going to do another cruise, why not get that free cruise credit? It just makes sense, right? Guys, that's it. I hope this has helped you plan your perfect Alaskan cruise adventure. I hope it's been enjoyable for you guys. And I really hope I've shown you guys something that is going to help you create some incredible memories. So friends, wherever you go, I hope you have smooth seas, happy sails, and I hope you make some memories that last a lifetime. Bon voyage!